Religion and mental illness. Alright, this is going to be a video on religion and mental illness. So what are the odds that all of the world religious leaders, when I say religious leaders, I mean people that were at the front of starting all of the world's major religions, right? Think about like Islam, Christianity, you know, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, all of these different world religions. Right? What are the chances, right, that the people that started these religions had mental illness, right? You know, mental illness, right, which can range quite a lot, which could range, you know, it can range a lot. There's a lot of different types of mental illnesses, right? But you know, right, imagine, right, like that the people that started all of these major world religions, right, they all had some sort of mental illness, right? Like, what are the chances, what are the odds of that being true, right? That really all of these different world religions, they came from people that were mentally ill. They came from people that were mentally ill, right? What are the chances of this being true? It's like, once you start to kind of think about this, it gets very, very interesting, right? Because let's just assume that people had that there was like people that had mental illness and stuff. They had mental illness, like the people that started all of these world religions, major world religions, they all had a type of mental illness and stuff. They all had a type of mental illness and stuff, and it's very interesting. It'll be very, very interesting and stuff, right? It'll be very interesting and stuff. If the people that started all of these world religions, right, they all had some type of mental illness. They all had some type of mental illness. They were just experiencing their own delusions, right? Their own mentally ill delusions, right? You know, let's say the Prophet Muhammad, for example, right? You know, like, you know, his life and stuff. Really, I mean, he lived a pretty ordinary life until he was like, I don't know, until the angel Gabriel kind of came into contact with him and started to give him revelations and stuff. Imagine, right, that this angel Gabriel, it could have just been some sort of manifestation of schizophrenia or something like this, right? Some sort of manifestation of schizophrenia. Could have been some type of very intense hallucination. Some very, very intense hallucination. Could have been the Prophet Muhammad could have been like hallucinating his entire encounter with this supposed angel and stuff. It's kind of very interesting if you think about it like this, right? That all of the major world religions are started by people who are mentally ill, people that had like problems with their brain. The biblical prophets now, right, as well. You know, they like the Bible is kind of very crazy if you think about it, right? People hearing voices from God supposedly telling them what to do. You know, Moses, right, was told by God supposedly, right, to circumcise, or I guess even to kill like one of his children, Isaac, or someone else similar, right? It's very once you think about it like this, it gets very, very interesting. It's very interesting that all the people that started all of these major world religions, they were just kind of mentally ill, and they had problems with their brain. They weren't thinking straight and stuff. And the religions they created and stuff, right? It's just, it all came out of their mental illness. You know, imagine if this is true, right? That'd be very weird. That'd be kind of very interesting. That'd be kind of very interesting if the people that started all of these major world religions, they all had some type of mental illness. That'd be very, very interesting if this was true. And that all of these people that started all of these major world religions, right, they were just people that had mental illness. And basically, right, all of their spiritual encounters, it was just coming out of their mental illness, right? Again, the Prophet Muhammad, you know, the angel Gabriel, that wasn't a real angel, so to speak, right? It was just something that his brain manifested to him while he was supposedly, I don't know, you know, in the cave and whatever, you know, just, you know, and the biblical prophets, right? They weren't hearing God's voices, they just had schizophrenia and stuff. Isn't it kind of weird we don't have any new prophets in the, I mean, I guess there are a lot of cult leaders and stuff, but, you know, the religion, it's starting to, like, there aren't really any new religions forming, right, that are shaking the world, like, right? That's kind of interesting, you know, because we can, people that kind of, you know, people that say they're prophets and stuff like this, right, today, right, you know, they're just seen as mentally ill. They're seen as being mentally ill. People that say that they're prophets, they have this sort of, they claim to be prophets and stuff like this. You know, people that say this, like, oh, they're having some sort of, you know, encounter with God or whatever. The people that talk like this, right, you know, they're very obviously, they have something wrong with their brain, right? So this makes me wonder, right, you know, all the people that started these major world religions, like, well, what are the odds that these people were also mentally ill, right? Like, you know, if someone says they've seen Jesus or they talked to God or something like this, you know, we can all rest assured, right, that this person that claimed he's talked to God or something like this is probably mentally ill, right? You know, anyone that says that he's talked to God or he's heard God talking to him in his head or something similar to like this, right, it's very safe, right, to assume that he might be having some problems with his brain. But, you know, the people that started all of these major world religions, we don't think about them like in the same way, right? That we think about if someone was like some random person was saying that they heard God's voice. We don't compare the major world religions like this, right? We don't see the people that started these major world religions, all the biblical prophets, the Prophet Muhammad, you know, these other people that created these other world religions, right? We don't see them in the same way, right? As someone who's just schizophrenic or as someone who's just mentally ill. You know, like, there's plenty of people alive today that claim, right, that say, right, and claim to be prophets and to hear God's voice and whatever and stuff like this. But, you know, we all very obviously know, right, that these people just have problems with their brain. They're just mentally ill, right? These people just have problems with their brain, and they're just very obviously mentally ill. These people, right, the people that say that they're hearing God's voice and they're speaking to Jesus and whatever, stuff like this. The people that say this, right, it's obvious, it's safe. It's very, very... It's very, very obvious, right, that they're just mentally ill. I mean, you know, the people that started these major world religions, right, you know, like Islam, you know, Christianity, Judaism, all these other religions like Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, all these other isms, all these other religions, right? We don't see the people that started these other religions in the same way. Like potentially they could have just been mentally ill. That's very likely, right? That these people that started these other world religions, they could have just had some sort of defect with their brain, so to speak, right? They could have just had maybe not been diagnosed properly with some type of mental condition like schizophrenia, or maybe even some other more extreme form of that, or something similar, right? You know, what are the odds, right? What are the chances, right, that the people that made all of these different world religions, they all had some sort of mental illness. Their brains weren't working properly, and they were seeing and hearing stuff that wasn't real. You know, it's very likely that this could be the case, right? You know, again, if someone today says that he's heard God, or he's talked to Jesus, or he's seen something like this, that's supernatural, right? It's very safe and obvious for us to assume that this person might just be mentally ill. But, you know, the people that started all of these major world religions, we don't see that in the same way. We don't, you know, if someone like, you know, the major world religions like Islam, Christianity, Judaism, you know, again, the Hinduism, Sikhism, and Buddhism and stuff like this, you don't see it in the same way. This stuff is weird. Don't see it in the same way. Weird. That's very weird. That people, you know, people, if anyone today said that they heard God's voice or Jesus, they spoke to Jesus, like, you would obviously see this person as being mentally ill, or he has some defect with his brain. But, you know, the people that started all of these major world religions, right? The people that started all of these major world religions, right? They said that they heard God's voice. They seen things that are not real, that can't be proven in this world, right? So to speak, real. When I say real, I mean real as in like they can't be proven, like according to a modern scientific knowledge, right? But, you know, we just kind of make up excuses and stuff, right? Nobody really thinks twice about this, right? They just kind of accept religion for what it is. It's just like, I don't know, it's true for just because it is, right? It's true just because of the way, just because it is true. That's it. You shouldn't be questioning it, right? This is just kind of but, you know, if someone today said that they heard God's voice or Jesus speak to them, you know, if someone today said that, right, that they heard God's voice, if someone today said that they heard God's voice, and then said that they were talking to Jesus or whatever like this, right, you would see that person as being very obviously mentally ill. You'd see him as having problems with his brain and stuff. But, you know, the people that started all of these major world religions, we don't apply the same line of, with this type of the same logic onto those people. That we don't apply the same, like, kind of sort of reasoning onto these people that started all of these major world religions, right? You know, again, what are the chances, right, that the people that started these major world religions, they just had some type of autism, they just had some type of Asperger's or something similar to like this, or maybe schizophrenia, and all of the spiritual experiences that they were having, it was just like a manifestation of this sort of mental illness, right? What are the chances of this happening and stuff? Right? That all of the world, all of the major world religions, right? All the people that started these major world religions, they had some sort of schizophrenia. They had some sort of schizophrenia, mental illness that wasn't diagnosed properly. Right, and, you know, these religions aren't really factual. You know? These religions aren't really true. They're not factual, right, so to speak. What do I mean by factual? Right? As factual, as in, like, the people that made these religions, they were actually seeing what they were claiming, right? They were seeing angels, they were hearing God's voices and stuff like this, right? This wasn't just their mental illness at work. This is like very tricky. Once you start to see religion in this way, right, that the people that started, you know, the people that started all of these major world religions, all the prophets, and so to speak, and whatever, right, they were really just people that had that had mental illness in the medieval period, right, or maybe in the earlier yeah, in the medieval period or before maybe, right? Because I know some biblical prophets came even before the biblical period. I mean, the medieval period, right? They were, I don't know, before, you know, I don't know. They were alive a long time ago, I guess, right? You know, but you know, plenty of. It's not just, you know, it's kind of the fact that there are so many different world religions that should really make you think, right? And of course, I don't really push strongly for atheism, right? I'm more agnostic myself. I don't really have any strong beliefs about anything really, right? I don't really push for anything, right? But you know, this should just kind of make you think and wonder, right? You know, all like people, if like again, let's just say someone was born today, right? He said that he started hearing God's voice. He said that he started seeing things that we can't even see ourselves, or that we can't prove outside of his own subjective experience, right? He said that he was talking to Jesus and whatever, stuff like this. If someone like this, if like someone born today, if they said this, right, you could see that person as being very obviously mentally ill. See, you could see that person as being very obviously mentally ill. See that person being very obviously sort of mentally ill and stuff. If he was alive today, right, and he claimed, if you know, again, if someone born today, alive today, right, said that they heard God's voice, right, and they said that they were, you know, they were in contact with God and whatever, and they were talking to Jesus, and they were just doing things we can't even do. Not really, I don't know about doing things, but they were seeing things that we can't even see ourselves, right? We can't really prove ourselves. It's only in their subjective experience, right? You know, someone like this was born today, and he claimed to be some sort of prophet, right? We wouldn't accept him, right? We would just see him as being mentally ill. But you know, the people that started all of these major world religions, especially the Abrahamic religions like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, these religions, right? The people that started these religions, especially, right, you know, we don't really put the same level of like this type of understanding on the people that started these religions, right? That perhaps they could have just had some sort of mental disorder and stuff, and they were making everything up. Of course, you know, it's impossible for us to know what they were actually experiencing, right? It's just kind of is up in the air. Right? We just have to, we you know, it's kind of. None of their experiences can be historically validated, right? All we have are accounts supposedly of what happened to them, right? Of the people that started specifically the Abrahamic religions, you know, the biblical prophets, Prophet Muhammad and stuff like this. We just have kind of basically, we don't really have any reliable information on what happened to these people, right? It's just, you know, the accounts, a lot of myths and stuff like this also came into the mix, right? It's kind of very difficult. And again, I'm not an atheist. I'm not pushing for atheism. But I'm just trying to kind of make you think a little bit more. Again, I'm not pushing for atheism. I'm just trying to kind of help you like expand your mind a little bit, right? Because you know, someone born today and alive today said that they were hearing God's voice and they were talking to angels and they were claiming all these things, right? You would just see that person. You would just see that person as being mentally ill. He has something wrong with his brain. But you know, the biblical prophets, you know, maybe even the Prophet Muhammad, of course, the other people that started all of these other major world religions, right? We don't see these other people, right, and the Abrahamic prophets in the same way, right? It's kind of very weird. Just because they were born a long time ago, just because of that, right? We just assume that they must be special, right? Because they were born a long time ago. It's not possible that they could have had some sort of mental illness. That's just that. It's not possible that they could have had some sort of mental disorder or something similar, right? They were born a long time ago, so they're special and they had some sort of divine experience. It isn't possible that they could have had just some sort of mental illness. And you know, this is very suspect in my opinion, right? Because you know, if someone born today, alive today, said that they're hearing God's voice, they're talking to Jesus or something similar like this, So, someone born today, alive today, said this, right? That they're hearing God's voice, they're talking to Jesus and whatever and stuff like this. Obviously we'll just see that person as being mentally ill. So of course, the people that say these sorts of things, right? That they're hearing God's voice, Jesus and stuff like this, they usually are mentally ill, right? Isn't that kind of funny? Like the people that say these sorts of things, that they're hearing God's voices, they're talking to Jesus and stuff. The people that say these sorts of things, they're usually mentally ill. So what are the chances? What are the odds that the people that started all of the major world religions, the people that the Abrahamic prophets, right, the biblical prophets, Prophet Muhammad, of course, the other people that started these other world religions, these other major world religions, right? What are the chances? What are the odds that these people might have also suffered from some sort of mental illness, right? Because we know today, right, the people that say that they hear God's voice and stuff like this, that they talk to Jesus and stuff, the people that say these sorts of things, they're usually mentally ill. Isn't that kind of very funny? In most cases, right, it's never been proven, right, that anyone's actually hearing God's voice or talking to Jesus. In most cases, right, people that say these sorts of things, they're just mentally ill, and they usually get put in a mental asylum, right? But, the biblical prophets, right, Prophet Muhammad, the people that started these other major world religions, the people that started these other major world religions. Right, we don't see that. We don't see it them in the same way, right? Even though it's very likely, right? These people that started these other major world religions, they could have just had some sort of. They could have just been suffering from some sort of mental illness, right? Today, right? If anyone born today, again, and I have to keep saying this, right? If anyone born today, alive today, said that they were hearing God's voice, they were talking to Jesus, they're having some sort of. So they were saying and claiming these things, right? If anyone alive today was like saying that they were hearing God's voices, they were talking to Jesus, etc., stuff like this, we would see that person as being mentally ill. And in most cases, right, people that say that they're talking to Jesus and hearing God's voice, they usually are mentally ill. It's never been proven that anyone that's supposedly hearing God's voice and talking to Jesus, that person, it's never been proven that he's actually hearing God's voice, he's talking to Jesus and whatever. And it really makes you wonder, right, really. It really makes you wonder, right, that these major world religions, right, the people that started these major world religions, if they were born today, you could just see them as being, the people that started these major world religions, you could very obviously see them as being mentally ill. You can very obviously see the people that started these major world religions, right? If the biblical prophets, right, if the Prophet Muhammad and stuff, if these people were born today in this modern age, what are the odds? What are the chances that they might just be diagnosed as being mentally ill? They weren't really hearing God's voices, right? They weren't really seeing anything supernatural. They just had some sort of mental illness, schizophrenia, something similar to this. And basically they were just kind of, hallucinating essentially, or just experiencing a type of delusion. Right, and essentially, right, that they weren't seeing anything that's really spectacular, right? It's just they were just they just had some sort of mental illness, and the religion, right? Because I'm talking specifically here about the biblical prophets and the Prophet Muhammad, right? The Abrahamic religions are essentially just they were made from delusions, right? They weren't made from people that were actually, in contact with God, so to speak, right? This really makes you wonder a lot, right? Because again, we know, right, today, right, most people that say that they talk to God, they hear God's voice or whatever, they talk to Jesus. People that say this, the people that say these sorts of things, right, in the modern age, it's very obvious that these people are just mentally ill. People that say they're hearing God's voice, they're talking to Jesus, they're all these sorts of things. And stuff. People that say these sorts of things, it's very obvious that they're just mentally ill. I mean, the biblical prophets, right? The Prophet Muhammad, the Abrahamic prophets, whatever. The other people that started all of these other major world religions, we don't see these other people in the same way as we would see someone that's mentally ill and stuff. That's very weird. That's very, very weird and stuff. We don't see these other people in the same way, and that's very bizarre. I mean, not other people. I mean, we don't see the biblical, the the so-called prophets in the same way, and that's very weird to me and stuff. It's very bizarre. It's very bizarre and stuff that we don't see these other, you know, these people that start these other major world religions. We don't see them in the same way as someone today that has mental illness, right? As someone today like that claims to be a prophet, right, so to speak. But really, it ends up just turning out that it ends up being that this guy that claims to be a prophet, he's just really mentally ill and stuff. He has problems with his brain. That's kind of bizarre and weird and stuff. That we don't see people that have like the so-called the Abrahamic prophets, especially, right? These other so-called prophets of these other major world religions. We don't see these other people in the same. I mean, these people specifically, these so-called prophets that started these major world religions. We don't see them in the same way as someone born today, or has like some sort of mental illness problem and stuff. That's kind of weird. It's very weird and stuff, bizarre. That, you know, the people that, you know, started these major world religions, right? They were just special, right? They were really talking to God, right? They just have this special type of experience. But you know, the people that today claim to be prophets, the people today that are born today, alive today, they say that they hear God's voice, they're talking to Jesus and stuff. These people, right? We don't see, you know, we see if anyone like born today, alive today, says that they're a prophet and they're hearing God's voice and stuff. You know, you see these people just being mentally ill. You know, we just see these people as being very obviously mentally ill. Right, you know, if, again, someone born today, alive today, said that they were hearing God's voice, they were talking to Jesus, whatever. Right, they would sing all of these things, right? You know, we see that we would be able to easily see that person as being mentally ill and just delusional, right? But you know, the people, the so-called prophets that started all of these major world religions, right? You know, these people, these special people that started all of these major world religions, and we don't see them as being mentally ill. It's kind of weird, and we don't have any reason not to assume that they weren't mentally ill, because you know, people alive today, most people alive today that say that they're in contact with God or something similar, right? They're talking to someone from, you know, someone that's very special. I don't know. They're usually mentally ill, right? They usually have schizophrenia or some mental condition that makes them makes them, like, I guess, not trustworthy, right? You know, anyone alive today that claims to be a prophet is usually mentally ill, right? That's usually almost always the case, right? It's very rare anyone that says that they're talking to God or hearing Jesus or something similar. It's very rare that the people that the people that claim these sorts of things aren't just mentally ill. So that should really make you wonder, right? That, you know, the people that started all of these major world religions, right? The so-called prophets, the Abrahamic prophets, or the biblical prophets, Prophet Muhammad, etc. I can go on and on. It makes you really wonder, right? What are the odds? What are the chances that the people like this, the people that started all of these major world religions, they weren't just mentally ill and stuff, man. They weren't just kind of suffering from schizophrenia and delusions and stuff. They weren't just mentally ill and stuff, man. Has some sort of schizophrenia or some other mental condition and stuff. What are the odds? What are the chances that they weren't just mentally ill? They weren't just mentally ill and stuff. They weren't just suffering from schizophrenia. They weren't just suffering from some sort of schizophrenia or mental illness. Like, what are the odds? What are the chances, right? The so-called prophets, the people that started all of these major world religions, again, what are the odds? What are the chances they weren't just mentally ill? And of course, there's no way to historically analyze there's no way to historically validate anything they were experiencing. So it's all speculation, right? But we know, right, that people that, you know, some people that are born today, alive today, right, that claim to be prophets, right? They claim to be hearing God's voice, so to speak, right? They're usually just mentally ill. They're usually not really, they're not really in contact with anything special, right? They're just usually mentally ill. It's almost always the case, right? That someone born today, alive today, someone that's saying that they're hearing God's voice or talking to Jesus and whatever, is almost always usually the case. It's almost always usually the case that the people that claim these sorts of things are usually just mentally ill. they're usually almost always mentally ill, right? People that, if you know, again, if someone born today, alive today, said that they're hearing God's voice and they're talking to Jesus, whatever, right? You know, it would usually, like, it's almost always the case, right, that these sorts of people are just mentally ill. But you know, the people that started all of these major world religions, right? You know which major world religions, right? You know, the Abrahamic religions, the Indian religions, right? Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, whatever. You know, these people are just special because they were born a long time ago. It's not possible that they could have had some sort of mental illness and stuff. And you know, this is kind of ridiculous, right? Very likely that they possibly might have had some sort of mental illness that wasn't diagnosed properly, right? Because we know, again, to people that are born today, alive today, right? They claim to be hearing God's voice, that they claim to be talking to Jesus and whatever. That claim to be talking to Jesus, hearing God's voice, whatever. Right? The people that say these sorts of things, the people that claim to be like in contact with something special, they're usually just mentally ill. Especially the people that are born and alive today, because we can, you know, we can properly diagnose these people as being mentally ill because we have the proper scientific knowledge now. And it's kind of very weird. Very weird and stuff, and that, you know, people, especially the major world religions and stuff, the people that started these major world religions, you know, the people that started all of these major world religions, right? The people that started all of these major world religions, right? Just because they were born a long time ago, it's impossible for them not to have been mentally ill, right? It's just impossible. They just must have been seeing the truth for some reason, right? They must have been actually talking to God or something similar, right? It's not possible that they weren't just mentally ill. But you know, the people that are alive today, born today, the people that are alive today and born today, and that claim to be community, that anyone that's alive today, born today, that says that they're talking to God, they're hearing God's voice, they're talking to Jesus and something similar. It's usually almost always the case that that these people are mentally ill. Again, you know, the people that started these major world religions, just because they were born a long time ago, you know, it's just that that just means that they're special, right? That just means that they were actually hearing and seeing God and stuff like this, just because they were born a long time ago. And you know, especially the Abrahamic prophets, the biblical prophets, you know, especially also, you know, the other people that started these other major world religions, they're just special because they were born a long time ago and stuff. You know, they're special because they were actually seeing and hearing God's voice and stuff like this, and they were talking to someone very special that we can't even prove existed, right? You know, it's funny, man. It's very funny if you think about it like this, right? You know, again, religion and mental illness, right? What are the chances? What are the odds? You know, that what are the chances? What are the odds, right? That, you know, the people, all of these people that started all of these major world religions, they weren't just mentally ill. Because we know, right? Anyone born today that claims to be speaking to God or talking to Jesus, they're usually almost always mentally ill, right? They usually have some sort of problem with their brain. But you know, just because these Abrahamic prophets, you know, the biblical prophets, Prophet Muhammad, these other people that start these other major world religions, just because they're born a very long time ago, right? That means they're special. It's not possible. It's not feasible that they could have just had some sort of mental illness. You know, it's kind of funny, right? You know, anyone alive today, born today, that claims to be hearing God's voice, talking to God, communicating to God, or whatever, or anything similar, they're talking to something special. They're in contact with some supernatural presence or force. The people that claim that they're experiencing something supernatural, right, and they're, you know, especially if they're born and alive today, it's almost always usually the case that they're just mentally ill and stuff. But you know, the Abrahamic prophets, these people that start these very major world religions, right? It's not, you know, no one, you wouldn't guess that they're mentally ill. The people that started all of these major world religions, it's kind of very weird. People, they don't see they don't kind of compare, right, like this sort of concept, right, that anyone born alive today that claims to be talking to God, claims to be experiencing something supernatural, right? You know, they're usually mentally ill, but you know, the people that are the Abrahamic prophets, the you know, biblical prophets, Prophet Muhammad, these other people that start these other major world religions, it's just not possible for them to be mentally ill because they were born a long time ago and they're super special for some reason. And you know, of course, this is just kind of ridiculous, right? You know, what are the odds, what are the chances that the people that started these major world religions, they were just mentally ill? You know, what are the chances? Because we know, right, that a lot of people that are alive today, born today, that claim to be prophets, that claim to be something special, right, they're usually just mentally ill. You know, and the people that are born today, alive today, that claim to be hearing God's voice, talking to Jesus and whatever, the people that claim these sorts of things is usually almost always the case that the people that claim these sorts of things, they're usually mentally ill. You know, especially if these people were born today, if these people were alive today, born today, you know, and they claim to be hearing God's voice, talking to Jesus, whatever, you know, it's obvious. You know, again, anyone born today, alive today, that claims to be hearing God's voice, that claims to be talking to Jesus and whatever, it's very obvious that people that claim these sorts of things and they're alive today, right, it's very obvious that they're just mentally ill, they're just experiencing delusions, right? I mean, you know, the people that start these major world religions, the Abrahamic prophets, right, the biblical prophets, the Prophet Muhammad, you know, these other people that start these other major world religions, we don't see that in the same way, right? That these people could have just been mentally ill, and all of their religious experiences were just some sort of personal delusions. They might have had schizophrenia or something similar, or just been hallucinating everything. That's kind of funny. We don't see that in the same way. That's so weird, right? We don't see it in the same way. The Abrahamic prophets, right? The other people that start these other major world religions, right? We don't see them as being mentally ill, because you know, anyone alive today that claims to be a prophet is usually almost always the case that this person is just mentally ill. His religious experiences are just a part of his mental delusions and stuff. His so-called religious experiences are just a part of his mental psychosis. It's just a part of his mental delusions and stuff. You know, the people that claim that are alive today, born today, that claim to be prophets, that say they're hearing God's voices, they're talking to Jesus, it's usually almost always the case that they're mentally ill. But, you know, the Abrahamic prophets, the biblical prophets, you know, the biblical prophets, again, the Prophet Muhammad, whatever, these other people that start these other major world religions, right? We don't see it in the same way. We don't see them in the same way that they could have just been mentally ill, experiencing some sort of delusions, right? All their religious experiences were just some sort of, they were just a part of their own mental psychosis, part of their own delusions and stuff. It was just a part of their own delusions. These people, these so-called biblical prophets, these so-called, you know, Abrahamic prophets, the Prophet Muhammad, these other very special people that start these other world religions, we don't see them as being mentally ill, right? And it's kind of weird why this is the case, because we know that anyone alive today, born today, that claims to be hearing God's voice, that claims to be talking to Jesus, right? So we usually know, right, that it's almost always the case that the people that claim these sorts of things are born today, alive today, it's almost, you know, again, almost always usually the case that they're mentally ill and they have some sort of problem with their brain. You know, these people that were born a long time ago that started all of these major world religions, we don't see them in the same way. We don't see them as possibly being mentally ill. The people that started all of these major world religions, we don't see that all of their religious experiences could have just been some form of psychosis or mental illness or some sort of very extreme delusion. Some sort of very extreme, could have been some sort of very extreme delusion that they were suffering from, and they just got kind of, I guess they weren't really seeing anything real. It was just a part of, they were just experiencing some sort of very advanced form of psychosis or something similar. You don't see it. We don't see it like these people that started all of these major world religions a long time ago. We don't see them in the same way as someone being mentally ill. And really, for what reason, right? Because, you know, we can't historically validate any of the major world religions, right? You know, the biblical prophets, we can't, you can't go back in time and see what they were actually hearing and seeing, right? all we have are very loose accounts from, you know, from a lot of traditions that could have been maybe misinterpreted, I guess. I don't know. Really, a lot of these major world religions, a lot of them rely on a lot of myth. A lot of them really literally just rely on a lot of things that are very suspect and hard to like validate, right? A lot of oral traditions, a lot of the holy scriptures. It's very, they're very difficult to kind of historically validate properly, right? But again, most people that are born today, alive today, that claim to be hearing God's voice, that claim to be talking to Jesus or something else like that, it's almost always usually the case that these people are usually just mentally ill. These people that started all of these major world religions, just because they were born a long time ago, that means they're special. That means that they were actually hearing and seeing something supernatural. Their religious experiences were true for some reason. That's just very bizarre in my opinion. Religion and mental illness, right? What are the chances, what are the odds that, the people that started all of these major world religions, what are the odds, what are the chances that these people were just mentally ill and they weren't really seeing anything that's, real? All their religious experiences were just some advanced form of psychosis and mental illness. You gotta really wonder and think about this. You should really, 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 really think about this, right? And again, I'm not an atheist. I'm not pushing for atheism. But you have to develop some sort of criticality, right? You have to become a critical thinker. You have to develop some sort of rational way of seeing the world, right? Hopefully this will kind of help in that, right? This will help you think a little bit more clearly, right?